There is a photograph, not a trophy shot, not a victory press conference, not someone holding a Grand Slam trophy above their head while confetti falls. Just a young woman in an oversized denim shirt, a raffia hat tilted slightly to one side, standing in the afternoon light somewhere in Madrid. The photographer is circling her, working the frame, finding the angle. She is 20 years old. Her name is Alex Eala. She is from the Philippines. And above her head, on the masthead of one of the oldest society magazines in the United States, her face is the cover. Now, before we get into what that means and why you should care, let me give you the one fact that makes this entire story worth telling. That cover ran in August of 2025, 10 months before she won anything, 10 months before most people outside the tennis world had ever heard her name, 10 months before any of the things happened that typically justify putting someone on a magazine cover at this level. The cover did not follow the story. The cover came first. And that distinction, that single inversion of the usual order of things, is what we are going to spend the next several minutes unpacking, because it says something not just about Alex Eala, but about how we decide who gets to be seen and when and why. Town and Country magazine was founded in 1846. Let that number sit for a second. 1846. That is 180 years of covers. 180 years of debutantes and duchesses, of old American money and European royalty, of the kind of people who summer as a verb and have names that appear on the sides of buildings. This is not a sports publication. It does not cover the WTA Tour. Its editorial calendar is built around philanthropy and fashion and the rooms most of us will never walk into. And yet on August 19th, 2025, Town and Country ran a digital cover featuring a Filipina tennis player ranked somewhere in the 50s who had never won a WTA title, who had never made a Grand Slam quarterfinal, who was by the conventional metrics of her sport still a promising player rather than an established star. That is an unusual decision. And when you sit with it long enough, it starts to feel like something more than unusual. It starts to feel like someone inside that building was paying very close attention to something the rest of the world had not quite registered yet. So let us trace this from the beginning, because the story has layers, and the layers only make sense in order. The first thing to understand is the convention, because the convention is what makes the departure meaningful. When a lifestyle magazine or a luxury publication puts a tennis player on its cover, the sequence almost always follows the same pattern. You wait for the hardware. You wait for the moment. Sloane Stephens got her Vogue cover after winning the 2017 US Open. Coco Gauff's lifestyle features followed her. Grand Slam final breakthrough. Naomi Osaka's covers came after Slam titles, not before. The pattern is consistent, and it exists for a reason. Magazines are not cheap to produce. A cover is a commitment of money and editorial real estate, and a bet that the person on the front will still feel relevant by the time readers see it. Getting that bet wrong in public is costly. So the convention is to wait until the player has done something undeniable, something that justifies the gloss and the glossy pages and the long lead time. You cover the achievement. Then you move on. Town and Country did not do that. In August of 2025, they chose a player who had a promising spring run, who had trained at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, who had built a name in junior tennis, who people inside the sport were watching with curiosity. But by the standard playbook, by the rules that govern this kind of editorial decision, she was too early. She had not done enough yet. And here is where the story gets interesting, because the person who can actually speak to what was happening inside that decision is the writer who wrote the piece. Her name is Emily Burke. She is Town and Country's deputy digital editor. And on the day the cover went live, she posted on her own Instagram and described it as, and I am paraphrasing here, a dream to write her second digital cover story for the magazine and to have it be their first tennis digital cover. Their first. This was not a sports feature tucked into a lifestyle issue. This was a category-opening moment inside one of America's oldest society publications. Someone at Town and Country looked at the WTA Tour, looked at this 20-year-old from the Philippines, and decided that tennis was now a part of the conversation this magazine was going to have with its readers. And they decided that Eala was the face they were going to introduce first. Not after the trophy. Not after the quarterfinal. Now. Before. And then the 10 months happened. March 9th, 2026. Alex Eala walks onto a stadium court at Indian Wells and reaches the round of 16. Becomes the first Filipino player, man or woman, ever to do that at that tournament. Town and Country runs a follow-up piece. The magazine has not placed its bet and walked away. It is still investing in the story, still tracking her, still telling its readership to pay attention. That is the second signal, and it matters because it shows this was not a one-off. It was a relationship. Then June 7th, 2026. The grass courts of Edgbaston Priory in Birmingham. Alex Eala drops the first set to Nicola Barcanova. She comes back. She wins. Her first career WTA singles title. Her first professional title on grass. A surface she had never won on at this level. The ranking moves to 33. The trophy goes into her hands. And somewhere in the archive at Hearst, in whatever digital folder holds the images from that August 2025 shoot, a cover that was described at the time as a bet begins to read like something else entirely. It begins to read like a forecast. And forecasts are interesting things because they only look smart in retrospect. In the moment, they just look like confidence. Or sometimes like arrogance. The honest question, the one worth asking before you let the story become too clean, is whether Town and Country actually saw something in August 2025, or whether they got lucky. Because those are not the same thing. A good editorial instinct and a fortuitous result can look identical from the outside. So, let us be precise about what the evidence actually shows. What the magazine had in front of it in August 2025 was a young woman who had shown real ability. She had a spring run earlier that year that put her on a few radars inside the sport. She had trained at one of the most prestigious academies in the world. She had a junior pedigree. She was moving. But movement is not arrival. Movement is potential. And potential has a long history of not converting. Every year the sport produces players who seem inevitable at 20 and are gone by 24. The cover was not responding to certainty. It was responding to something murkier than that, something closer to a read on a person, a belief that what this player had could not be faked and would not go away. And the fact that the magazine doubled down with the Indian Wells follow-up, rather than quietly moving on if things had stalled, suggests that the bet was deliberate and not accidental. That is a meaningful distinction. Now step back for a moment from the tennis and think about what the cover actually represents as a cultural event, because this is where the story gets bigger than one player's career arc. Town and Country has 180 years of covers behind it. For most of that history, those covers have featured a very specific kind of person from a very specific kind of world. American debutantes, European aristocracy, society figures, the architecture of old money, and inherited prestige. The magazine was built to chronicle that world and to make it legible and aspirational to a certain kind of reader. Putting a 20-year-old Filipina tennis player on that masthead is not a small thing in the context of that history. It is a statement about what Town and Country believes belongs in the room it has spent 180 years curating. And that statement, made in August 2025, about a player who had not yet done the things that conventionally justify that kind of visibility, carries a weight that goes beyond tennis. It is a statement about who gets to be seen before they have proven themselves, and who is typically asked to wait. Because that is the subtext inside the conventional playbook. The convention of waiting for the slam and waiting for the title and waiting for the hardware, while it exists for legitimate editorial reasons, also means that certain players wait longer than others. It means the doors open on a slower timeline for some faces than for others. When Town and Country decided not to wait, when they chose the photograph in Madrid over the imagined photograph at a Grand Slam press conference, they were making a choice about that timeline. They were saying we do not need to wait for the world to confirm what we already see. And then the person in the photograph went and did her part. The Indian Wells run. The Birmingham Trophy. The ranking climbing from somewhere in the 50s to 33 and still moving. The thing about a cover that comes before the story is that it puts the player in a position. It says to the world, this is someone worth watching. And then the player either makes that statement look prescient or makes it look naive. Eala, in the 10 months that followed, gave the magazine reason after reason to feel like the former. But there is a line from the original article, from the interview Emily Burke conducted back in August of 2025, that deserves its own moment here. Eala said, and I'm paraphrasing because I will not put exact quotes in her mouth, that the only thing she felt she could give back to her country was to inspire. That is the sentence. Now think about what that sentence meant in August of 2025, when it was first published. In that context, it is aspiration. It is a 20-year-old talking about what she hopes to become, what she hopes to mean to the people watching her from the Philippines. It is a promise without yet the receipts to back it up. But read that sentence again now. After Indian Wells, after Eastbourne, after Birmingham, after 52,000 likes on a single Instagram post from Filipino fans around the world responding to that magazine cover. After the Filipino press treated her town and country feature not as a sports story, but as a cultural milestone. After ABS-CBN and GMA and Rappler and the Inquirer all covered her not as a tennis player who had a good tournament, but as a Filipino woman who was becoming visible in rooms that Filipino women had historically not been invited into. Read that sentence in June of 2026, and it is no longer aspiration. It is a contract being honored, slowly, match by match, title by title, ranking point by ranking point. The sentence has not changed. Everything around it has. And that is the emotional center of the story. Not the trophy, not the ranking. The sentence and the gap between the first time you read it and the second time. There is also a voice from inside the sport that lines up with what the magazine was doing, and it is worth including here because it comes from an unlikely source. After Barbara Krejcikova, the 2024 Wimbledon champion, faced Eala at Wimbledon in 2025, she had something to say about the young Filipina. She described Eala hitting the ball hard, staying clean through the lines, and called her the next generation, saying something to the effect that this player was going to be very good in a couple of years. A Grand Slam champion, standing in the locker room corridor at the All England Club, telling journalists that the player she had just played against was going to be something. That is not a polite comment. Grand Slam champions are not typically generous about opponents they expect to be threats. That is a player who walked off a court and genuinely meant what she said. And the fact that Krejcikova's assessment and Town and Country's editorial decision arrived in roughly the same 12-month window, independent of each other, from completely different vantage points, feels significant. Two very different institutions looking at the same player and reaching the same conclusion, that this was the face worth watching, that this was the name to know before it was the name everyone knew. Now zoom out one more time and look at the bigger editorial map that Town and Country has been quietly drawing. The magazine ran a feature on Mira Andreeva. It covered aspects of the women's tour in ways that a magazine of this type rarely does. It came back to Eala for the Indian Wells follow-up. A tennis editorial thread has formed inside one of America's oldest society publications, and Eala is not standing at the back of that thread. She is one of the names defining it. That is a meaningful shift in a landscape where tennis coverage tends to cluster around a handful of well-established names and the same handful of platforms. For Filipino tennis specifically, the precedent here is stark. There is no comparison to what this cover represents because there is no prior version of it. No Filipino tennis player on either the men's or the women's side had previously held a digital cover at this tier of American luxury media. The Filipino press understood exactly what they were looking at. This was not a sports story. It was a visibility story. It was about a society magazine in New York choosing a Filipina to introduce to a readership that typically does not follow the WTA tour, and making that introduction before the conventional justifications existed. The reach of that choice extends well beyond the rankings page, and into a broader conversation about who gets to be visible and where, and when and why. But here's the part of the story that matters because it keeps this from becoming a clean triumph narrative. On June 10th, 2026, 3 days after Birmingham, Alex Eala walked onto a grass court at the Queen's Club Championships in London. She was coming off the best week of her professional career. She had a 6-match winning streak on grass behind her. She had a first career title under her belt. She was ranked 33rd in the world. And she lost in straight sets to the American EALA'S 6-2, 6-2 in the round of 16. The streak